Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back in time, about 3,000 years, to the sun-drenched banks of the Nile. We are going to step into the sandals of a figure who was both one of the most revered and one of the most avoided people in all of ancient Egypt. An Embalmer. It's a job that was deeply sacred, meticulously scientific for its time, and let's be honest, probably had the most unique bouquet of smells in the entire kingdom. You are about to learn a craft that promises eternal life. But first, you've got to get your hands, well, very, very dirty. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are at it, I would love to know where you're all tuning in from. Drop your city and the time in the comments below. It's always so cool to see this little community of ours spread across the globe, all winding down together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in Thebes hangs thick and heavy, not just with the heat shimmering off the sand, but with the scent of life. It's a mix of roasting grains from the market, fragrant lotus blossoms drifting from a noble's garden, and the ever-present, earthy smell of the Nile itself. But where you are headed, the air changes. You follow your father down a dusty path that veers away from the bustling heart of the city, toward the West Bank, the land of the setting sun, the land of the dead. You are just a teenager, and this is your first day as a true apprentice. Your hands, usually stained with mud from playing by the river, are clean for once, but you have a feeling that won't last long. You are entering a world that most Egyptians only whisper about. The Embalmer's workshop, the Waabet, which literally means the pure place, a name that feels a little bit like a joke. Given what happens inside, it's a long, low building made of mud brick, deliberately set apart from the homes of the living. As your father pushes aside the heavy linen curtain that serves as a door, the smell hits you. It's not foul, not yet. It's a powerful, almost overwhelming perfume of incense, dried flowers, myrrh, cashew, and something else. Something deeply organic and sharp, like a butcher's shop left in the sun. This is the scent of your future. Your father, the master Embalmer, doesn't say much. His hands, stained dark by resins and salts, are his primary language. He points to a corner where another young man is meticulously grinding something in a stone mortar. That's your first job, grinding natron. It's a natural salt, a blend of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, harvested from the dry lake beds of Wadi El Nedran. It looks like coarse, grayish-white crystals, and it's the key to everything here. It pulls the water from the flesh, preserving the body from decay. This is the central, mainstream knowledge of your craft. Dehydration is the enemy of decomposition. As you work, your father begins to speak, his voice a low hum against the rhythmic scrape of your pestle. HES, not teaching you a trade. He explains, HES teaching you a sacred art. You are not merely a craftsman. You are a servant of Anubis, the jackal-headed god who oversees embalming and guides souls to the underworld. Your work ensures that the deceased Eskal, their life force, and their being, their soul or personality, can recognize their body, the cart, then reunite with it in the afterlife. Without a preserved body, the soul is lost, doomed to wander aimlessly forever. Suddenly, grinding these boring white crystals feels a lot more important. You soon learn a strange social truth, a little piece of trivia nobody mentions in the temples. As an Embalmer, you are both respected and feared. People need you. The pharaoh himself will one day need a man of your skills, but because you work with the dead, you are considered ritually unclean. You and your family will likely always live here, on the edge of the necropolis, separated from the general populace. Children might stop their games and fall silent when you walk by. It's a strange paradox. Your hands perform the most sacred of services, yet they are hands that others are hesitant to touch. Historians still debate the full social implications of this. Were Embalmers seen as holy priests, or as a necessary but tainted artisan class? The truth, you sense, is somewhere, uncomfortably, in the middle. Your father gestures for you to stop grinding. He leads you to a row of tools laid out neatly on a reed mat. There are long bronze hooks of varying sizes, sharp flint and obsidian knives, linen bandages, and clay pots filled with thick, dark resins. He picks up a long, slender hook with a corkscrew end. This, he says, holding it up to the light filtering through the high, narrow windows, is for the mind. He doesn't elaborate, and you don't ask. You just look at the tool, then back at your own hands, still dusty with salt. Your apprenticeship has just begun, and you can already tell it's going to be a long, strange journey. You hold that thought, the image of the bronze hook glinting in the dusty light, when a new sound intrudes from the outside world. It starts as a faint, rhythmic wail, a sound that's as much a part of the band's soundscape as the braying of donkeys or the shouts of boatmen on the Nile, but it's getting closer. The sound grows, swelling into a chorus of grief, a river of sorrow, flowing toward your quiet sanctuary. Your father places the hook back on the mat with a soft click and straightens up, his face calm, professional. The moment has arrived. You put down your pestle and stone mortar, the half-ground entrance all forgotten for a moment. You move to the edge of the doorway, peering through a thin gap in the linen curtain. A procession is making its way up the path. At the front are the mourners, mostly women, their hair disheveled and caked with dust. Their clothes are simple, their tunics deliberately torn as a sign of grief. Then they beat their bare chests in a slow, steady rhythm that matches their cries. You see them scooping up handfuls of dust from the path and dropping it onto their faces and into their hair. A very public and very visceral display of sorrow. This is your first encounter with professional mourners, a fascinating and slightly strange custom. For a fee, these women provide a dramatic performance of grief, ensuring that a person's passing is marked with the appropriate level of public lamentation. The louder the wails, the more important the deceased appears. Behind them, a group of male relatives carries a simple wooden litter. On it lies a body, wrapped tightly in a white linen shroud. Even from a distance, you can see the stillness, the absolute finality of it. The family follows, their grief more subdued, more real. A woman, presumably the widow, walks with her head bowed, her silent tears carving clean paths through the dust on her cheeks. A young son clutches her hand, his eyes wide, trying to make sense of the strange ceremony. Your father steps out from the wabed, his presence immediately calming the scene. The professional mourners quiet their cries to a low hum. The family looks to him with a mixture of desperation and hope. He is the man who holds the key to eternity. He speaks to the eldest son, his voice too low for you to hear the words, but his tone is one of serene competence. This is a sacred transaction, but it is also a business. The body has been brought to the West Bank quickly. In this heat, decay is a swift and relentless enemy. The journey to the afterlife must begin without delay. The mainstream knowledge here is that Egyptian funerary practices were deeply ingrained in their social structure. The scale of your mourning and the quality of your mummification were direct reflections of your status in life. A poor farmer might be buried in a simple pit in the sand, where the hot, dry earth would naturally desiccate the body. But this man, you learn from snippets of conversation, was a scribe named Mena, a man of letters, of some standing and some wealth. He will not be left to the mercy of the desert sands. He will receive the proper, careful attention of your craft. As the litter is brought closer, you catch a whiff of the first, faint scent of decay, a sickly sweet smell that the incense and perfumes inside the workshop are designed to combat. Your father directs the bearers to carry Mena inside, and here you witness a strange, unwritten rule. The immediate family may step just inside the threshold, but the professional mourners, their job now done, stay outside. They will collect their payment and disperse, their well-practiced sorrow melting away as they return to the land of the living. Historians still debate the true role of these figures. Were they simply a service, a status symbol for the grieving family, or did they hold a more profound, almost priestly function, acting as communal vessels for the sorrow of the community, allowing the family to focus on the more practical and spiritual next steps? You watch them turn away and can't help but feel it was a bit of both. The heavy linen curtain falls, shutting out the bright sunlight and the sounds of the world. The air inside the wombat suddenly feels thick with purpose. The low humming of the apprentice in the corner resumes, but it's no longer a sound of peaceful routine. It's the sound of work beginning. On a long stone table in the center of the room, the body of Mana now rests. He is your first client. Your father looks at you and gestures for you to come closer. Your apprenticeship is over. Your real work is about to begin. You approach the stone table, your sandals scuffing softly on the floor. The air inside the wombat seems to have its own geography. Near the entrance, the scent of myrrh and frankincense dominates. A heavy, sweet cloud meant to welcome the deceased and appease the gods. But as you move deeper into the workshop, toward the center of the room, other, more functional smells take over. The sharp, almost metallic tang of the nutrients alt you were grinding. A faint, wine-like aroma of fermented palm wine stored in large clay amphorae. And underlying it all, the undeniable, organic scent of what is to come. Your father guides you around the workshop, turning it from a place of intimidating smells and shadows into a space you can understand. This, he explains, is the wombat, the pure place, but it is also a place of immense pollution in a ritual sense. That's why it's built here, on the western bank, the traditional land of the dead, far from the homes of the living. It's a space that exists in a kind of limbo, between the world of humans and the world of humans and the world of the gods. You are standing on sacred ground, but it's a ground that requires constant purification. He shows you the tools again, not just as objects, but as extensions of your will and purpose. The long bronze hooks for the brain, you now understand, are designed to be minimally invasive to the face, preserving the deceased's likeness. The obsidian knife, a shard of black volcanic glass sharper than any metal blade, is reserved for a single, sacred cut. Mainstream history tells us this is because obsidian holds a ritual purity that metals, products of human artifice, do not. It's a blade given by the earth itself. He points to the rows of clay jars. Some hold expensive imported oils and resins from Punt or the Levant, while others contain more common materials like sawdust, onions, and bundles of linen. Every item has its place and its purpose. Then he introduces you to the rest of the team. This isn't a one-man operation. Mummification is a team effort. The well-oiled is somewhat grim, assembly-lined. There's the Master Embalmer, your father, who is also known as the Hirias, DSHTA, the controller of the mysteries. He oversees the entire process and performs the most critical rites. Then there's the Hiri-TEP, the chief physician or priest, who recites the sacred incantations from a papyrus scroll. He is the spiritual guide for the journey. You see him now, a stern-faced man in a clean white kilt, preparing his scrolls in a quiet corner, almost as if HES in a different room altogether. And then there's the KHETMU, the seal bearer, who manages the finances and procures the materials. HES the one who will negotiate with the family. Finally, there are the wet YW, the cutters and wrappers, the general laborers. That's you. You are at the bottom of the hierarchy, the hands that will do the bulk of the physical work. You notice that one of these men has a specific, slightly unnerving title, the slasher or ripper. Chists in later Greek accounts. He is the one designated to make the incision in the abdomen. It's a job that is both essential and ritually defiling. You learn a strange piece of trivia. After this man makes the cut, he is often subjected to a ritual of mock stoning or being chased away by the other embalmers, who throw curses after him. This symbolic act purifies the rest of the team by casting all the blame for the desecration of the body onto one person. It's a clever, if slightly dramatic, bit of spiritual theater. The debate among Egyptologists rages on about the precise hierarchy and titles within the workshop. The terms we use, like curiosity SHTA, are found in various texts, but were they standardized titles across all of Egypt, or did they vary by region and time period? Was the man reciting the spells always a priest? Or could he be a literate emblem? The lines between priest, doctor, and artisan were often blurry. You get the sense that titles aren't as important as the task at hand. Everyone does their role, and the rhythm of the work is all that matters. Your father finishes the tour back at the stone slab where Mena, the scribe, lies waiting. He looks peaceful, almost asleep under the shroud. But you know that peace is temporary. The forces of decay are already at work, an invisible army marching through his cells. Your job is to stop that army, to defeat time itself. Your father hands you a small clay bowl and a sponge made of rough seagrass. The first step is always purity. He says, "We wash the outside before we can tend to the inside. We wash him with Nile water and palm wine. Go, your hands are about to get wet." The sacred, messy, and deeply strange process of making a mummy has officially begun. Your father steps away, leaving you by the stone table with your bowl and sponge. Just as you are about to dip the sponge into the water, the linen curtain rustles again. The K'H the seal baron business manager of this whole operation, enters, followed closely by Mena's eldest son. The young man's face is a mask of grief and confusion, and he clutches a small but heavy-looking pouch in his hand. It's time for the part of the process that isn't written about in the sacred texts, but is just as crucial, the negotiation. You stand back, trying to be invisible, but you listen intently. This is a side of the craft you hadn't considered. The K'H a man with kind eyes but a firm voice, begins to lay out the options for the family. It's not a single, one-size-fits-all procedure. Mummification, you realize, is a bespoke service with different tiers of quality and price. It's a bit like ordering from a menu, a very, very final menu. The K'H explains the top-tier option, the one reserved for royalty and the very wealthy. This involves the most meticulous brain removal, the finest imported oils like cedar oil for cleansing the abdominal cavity, the highest quality linen for wrapping, and of course, a beautifully decorated sarcophagus, perhaps even a set of nested coffins. He gestures vaguely towards a corner where a magnificent, human-shaped coffin, covered in intricate paintings, is being finished for another client. The price he murmurs for this service makes Mena's son flinch slightly. Then he describes the second, more common option, which is still highly effective, but cuts a few corners. Perhaps instead of expensive imported oils, they would use palm wine more liberally. The body might not be as carefully plumped and reshaped, and the wrappings would be of a lesser grade linen. The internal organs might still be preserved in canopic jars, but the jars themselves would be made of simple clay or limestone rather than expensive calcite. This is the package most well-to-do Egyptians, like a successful scribe, would likely choose. This is a well-known historical fact, recorded by the Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt long after its golden age, but meticulously documented the different classes of embalming he was told about. Finally, the K'H mentions the third, most basic option for those with limited means. For this, the embalmers might not even make an incision. Instead, they would inject a harsh liquid, possibly cedar oil or something akin to turpentine, into the abdomen to dissolve the organs. Then drain the cavity after a set number of days. The body would then be simply packed in natron to dry it out. It was a quicker, cheaper method that still offered a chance at preservation and, therefore, a chance at an afterlife. You learn a strange little tidbit during this negotiation. The linen bandages used for wrapping weren't always brand new. For a mid-tier or lower-tier mummification, it was common practice to use recycled linen. This could be old clothing, ship sails, or household sheets donated by the family. Sometimes, families would even pre-donate linen to their local temple over the years, which would then be given to the embalmers for their future use. It was both economical and believed to add a layer of personal, familial essence to the final wrapping. Mena's son listens patiently, his knuckles white as he grips the pouch of money. He asks a few quiet questions. How long will it take? 70 days. The KHETMU replies, always 70 days. Will the heart be protected? The KHETMU reassures him that the heart, the seat of intelligence, will be carefully preserved within the body. After a few more moments of quiet deliberation, they agree on a price. It seems they've settled on the second option, with a few small upgrades. Perhaps a better quality resin for sealing the bandages. The son carefully counts out the deben, rings of silver and copper, into the KHETMU's outstretched hand. The deal is struck. The debate among scholars here is whether Herodotus' neat three-tiered description was an oversimplification. Archaeological evidence suggests a much wider spectrum of mummification practices, with countless variations based on price, local customs, and the specific historical period. It was likely less of a fixed menu and more of a sliding scale of available services. Some mummies have been found with surprisingly sloppy work hidden under beautiful outer wrappings, suggesting that even in ancient times, you didn't always get what you paid for. With the business concluded, Min-Ene's son gives his father shrouded from one last long look. He bows his head to the KHETMU, gives a respectful nod to your father, and then backs out through the curtain, leaving the world of the dead behind. Now, there are no more distractions. The price has been paid. The contract for eternity has been signed. Your father looks at you and nods. It's time to get to work. The purification can now truly begin. The negotiations are over. The family is gone, and a quiet sense of purpose settles back over the warbed. The real work begins not with a knife, but with water. Your father gestures for you to bring your bowl and sponge to the stone table, which is actually a purpose-built embalming table, slightly slanted in with a channel carved around the edge to allow fluids to run off into a basin. Efficiency is key. You and another apprentice get to work. First, the shroud is gently removed from Min-Ene's body. It is the first time you see a deceased person up close, not as a shrouded bundle, but as a human being who, just days ago, was walking, talking, and breathing the same, the ban air as you. He is pale and still. You feel a flicker of apprehension, but your father's calm demeanor is contagious. This is not meta anymore, he had explained. This is the cot, the physical vessel that must be preserved. You dip your rough sponge into a basin of cool water, brought fresh from the Nile. This initial wash is a practical step, cleansing the body of any dust from the journey and any impurities from the final moments of life. But it is also deeply symbolic. The Nile is the source of all life in Egypt. It is only fitting that the journey to the next life begins with its sacred water. As you gently wash the limbs and torso, the Hirutep, the lector priest, begins his work. He unrolls a papyrus scroll and begins to chant in a low, monotonous drone. The words are ancient, invoking the gods to protect the body and guide the soul. This is a core part of the process that is often overlooked in modern descriptions. Mummification was never just a physical procedure. It was a continuous religious ritual. Every physical action was accompanied by a corresponding magical or religious utterance. The workshop is filled with the sound of his voice, a constant reminder that you are treading on holy ground. After the first wash with water, you move on to the second. This time, you use palm wine. The wine is slightly acidic and the alcohol content acts as a mild disinfectant, helping to kill surface bacteria that could accelerate decay. You pour it liberally over the body. Its sweet, fermented scent mixing with the incense and the ever-present smell of natra. You work methodically, carefully, leaving no part of the skin untouched. You are focused on the task, the repetitive motion of washing and cleansing. Here you learn a small, fascinating detail. The embalmers had to be careful with the body's hair and nails. It was believed that these should be preserved, as they were part of the individual's identity. Often, small pieces of string or even gold wire were used to tie the fingernails and toenails in place, ensuring they wouldn't become detached during the long, harsh process of desiccation in natron salt. It's a small detail that shows the incredible level of care and belief invested in the process. Once the washing is complete, Min-Ene's body is repositioned on the stone slab. He is laid on his back, his head resting on a wooden block that resembles a headrest you might find in any Egyptian home. It is now time for the first and perhaps most delicate of the internal procedures. But even before that, another act of purification must occur. Your father takes a small, sharp flint knife. He doesn't approach the body, but instead goes to his own mouth. In a swift, practiced motion, he touches the blade to his lips. This is part of a complex ritual known as the opening of the mouth, while the main ceremony will be performed on the finished mummy much later. Elements of it are incorporated throughout. By touching the tools to his own mouth, the master embalmer symbolically enlivens them, giving them the power to perform their task in a way that is sacred, not merely brutal. Historians continue to debate the full meaning and sequence of these ritual actions. Were they performed in a strict, unchangeable order for every mummy, or was there room for improvisation based on the priest's or embalmer's discretion? The papier that describe these rituals are often fragmented or written for a royal burial, leaving the daily practices for commoners like men somewhat of a mystery. Now the body is clean on the outside. The priest's chants have created a protective field of sacred words around it. The tools have been ritually activated. The air is thick with anticipation. Your father picks up that long, slender bronze hook he showed you earlier. He looks at man and Ahaz's face, peaceful and still. Then he looks at you, and, with a slight nod, indicates that you should watch closely. The next step is one that requires a steady hand, a strong stomach, and a deep understanding of the hidden pathways inside the human head. You hold your breath. The lector priest's chanting seems to fade into the background, becoming a low, steady hum that's just part of the room's atmosphere. All of your focus narrows to the small, still space around man and Ahaz's head in your father's hands. He cradles the back of the head gently, tilting it just so. With his other hand, he picks up not the long hook, but a small, sharp chisel and a wooden mallet. This is the part that no one ever really wants to think about. The part that makes most people squirm even thousands of years later. He places the tip of the chisel just inside one of men and Ahaz's nostrils, aiming for the thin, fragile bone at the top of the nasal cavity, the ethmoid bone. He gives you a quick, instructive glance. There is no other way. The face must be preserved. The likeness of the deceased is paramount for the Khan-BA to recognize their home. The large, disfiguring incision on the head is unthinkable. Therefore, the entire procedure must be done through this tiny, hidden pathway. With a single, sharp, and shockingly loud tap of the mallet, he breaks the bone. You flinch, but your father's hands are steady. He has created an entry point. Now, he sets aside the chisel and mallet and picks up the long bronze hook. This is the tool you've been trading and marveling at. He slides it carefully into the nostril, upward, into the cranial cavity. And now, the most unpleasant work begins. The brain, in the ancient Egyptian view, was not the seat of consciousness or intelligence. They believed it was the heart that fulfilled that role. The brain was considered little more than cranial stuffing, a producer of mucus. Its preservation was not only unnecessary but undesirable, as its high water and fat content would make it a primary source of rapid decay. It had to go. He begins to move the hook back and forth, side to side, with a practiced, whisking motion. You can't see what's happening inside the skull, but you can imagine it. He is liquefying the brain matter, breaking it down into a semi-liquid state. This is the mainstream historical understanding of the process known as extra-ebrotion. It's a grisly, but necessary, first step in halting the decomposition of the head. After several minutes of this grim work, he tilts men and Ahaz's head forward. They thin, grayish-pink fluid begins to trickle out of the nostrils into a waiting bowl. It's a slow, messy process. He uses other, smaller hooks and spatulas to scrape and pull out the more solid pieces of the dura mater, the brain's tough outer membrane. He might even pour water or palm wine into the empty cranial vault to wash it out. It takes a long time to get most of it out, and you learn a rather disgusting piece of trivia. It was almost impossible to remove the brain completely this way. Modern CT scans of mummies often reveal that a significant portion of the brain stem and cerebellum tucked away at the base of the skull, was frequently left behind, along with fragments of the cerebrum. The embalmers did the best they could with the tools they had. The debate among researchers is not if they removed the brain, but how consistently and how well. Some mummies show a very neat and thorough removal, while others are quite haphazard. Was this a difference in the skill of the embalmer, the price paid by the family, or did different workshops have slightly different techniques? Some scholars even propose that for certain lower status mummies, the brain might have been left in place entirely, contrary to what the classical sources like Herodotus suggest. The evidence from the mummies themselves is varied and complex. Finally, your father seems satisfied. The unpleasant task is mostly done. He packs the now empty cranial cavity with strips of linen that have been soaked in resin or other fragrant, preserving agents. This helps the head maintain its shape as it dries and fills the void left by the brain. He carefully cleans Nas face, wiping away any trace of the grim procedure. When he is finished, the scribe's face looks just as it did before, peaceful and undisturbed. No one looking at him would ever know the violence that had just been done. Your father catches you staring, a look of queasy fascination on your face. He gives a rare, thin smile. The mind is nothing, he says, tapping his own chest. The heart is everything. Never forget that. He gestures toward the scribe's torso. The most delicate part of the job is over. Now, the most sacred part is about to begin. With the difficult work on the head complete, a different kind of solemnity fills the workshop. The next step is irreversible and carries immense ritual weight. Your father gestures to the man you know as the slasher. The pair is chists. The man steps forward, and you notice he doesn't carry a bronze knife, but a single, wickedly sharp shard of black obsidian. Its polished edges gleam in the lamplight. This is a moment steeped in tradition. As your father explained, the use of a flint or obsidian knife was deliberate. These stone tools were considered purer than metal, which was a product of mining and smelting, human arts that could be seen as a violation of the natural order of the body. A stone knife, by contrast, was a gift from the earth, and its use was a tradition stretching back to the earliest days of Egyptian history, long before bronze was common. This is a well-documented piece of historical knowledge, highlighting the blend of practicality and deep-seated religious belief that defined your craft. The slasher doesn't speak. His face is set in a grim, focused expression. He knows his role in the sacred drama. The lector priest, who had been chanting softly, now raises his voice. His incantations become more direct, addressing the spirit of the deceased, reassuring it that this necessary violation is for its own eternal good. He is, in essence, asking for permission. Your father takes a piece of charcoal and draws a straight, clean line on the left side of Nas abdomen. This is the guy. The incision must always be on the left side, a rule followed with very few exceptions throughout thousands of years of mummification. The reason is practical. It provides the best access to the major organs of the abdominal cavity, the stomach, intestines, liver, and spleen, while avoiding the heart, which is situated more centrally. The slasher kneels, positioning the obsidian blade at the top of the charcoal line. He takes a breath. Your father gives a sharp nod. In one swift, deep, and practiced motion, he draws the blade down, opening a long, clean incision. It is a moment of profound transgression. The integrity of the body has been broken. The barrier between the inner and outer self is gone. The slasher immediately stands, places the obsidian knife on a designated mat, and, without a word, retreats to the edge of the workshop. And then, the strange ritual you heard about happens right before your eyes. Another apprentice picks up a few small, loose stones from a bowl and throws them in the slasher's direction. Not to hit him, but as a symbolic gesture. He mutters a theatrical curse. It's a piece of ritual theater, a way to ritually cleanse the act. The slasher has taken upon himself the sin of cutting the sacred form, and now he is punished and cast out, allowing the rest of you to proceed with your work in a state of ritual purity. It's a bizarre but brilliant piece of psychological and spiritual hygiene. Here lies a point of debate for historians. Was this ritual of chasing the slasher a universal practice, as later Greek writers described, or was it a more localized or exaggerated account? Egyptian sources themselves are largely silent on this specific piece of drama. They focus on the sacred prayers and the desired outcome, not the nitty-gritty, and perhaps slightly embarrassing details of the workshop floor. It's possible it was a real tradition, or perhaps it was a story the Egyptians told curious foreigners to add a little dramatic flair to their descriptions. Now, your father turns to you. The cut has been made. The way is open. He hands you a bronze knife. This time, metal is acceptable, as the initial sacred cut has already been made with stone. He also gives you a set of long, hooked tools, similar to the ones used for the brain but more robust. The viscera, he says, simply, we must clear the house to preserve the walls. You take a deep breath. The complex scents of palm wine, incense, and now fresh blood filling your senses. You approach the opening. This is the true test of an emblem. It's one thing to grind salt or wash a body. It's another thing entirely to reach inside a person. You look at your hands, the same hands that played games by the river just a short time ago. They are about to enter a realm that few will ever touch. Your heart pounds in your chest, a stark contrast to the still one lying just inches from your reach. You kneel beside the stone slab. The opening can mend and a subdomen a dark gateway. The air is thick with the iron-rich smell of blood, but it's quickly being masked by the incense. The lector priest is now burning more intensely. Your father guides your hand for the first time, showing you how to use the hooked tools and your own fingers to gently but firmly detach the organs from the connective tissues that hold them in place. The work is disorienting, a blind exploration in a warm, slippery cavity. First, you are taught to remove the intestines. They are the longest and most cumbersome of the organs, and also the most dangerous from a preservationist's perspective. Filled with digesting food and bacteria, they are a primary engine of decay. You learn to carefully pull them out, severing them at both ends. They are surprisingly heavy. You place the long, coiled mass into a large, waiting clay bowl. Next, your father directs your attention higher up in the cavity, under the diaphragm. Here you find the stomach. It is simpler, or contained organ to remove. You work it free and place it in the same bowl. Then comes the liver, the largest of the internal organs, a dense, dark red mass. It requires more careful cutting to free it from its attachments. Finally, you search for the lungs. Though they are in the chest cavity, they are typically removed through the same abdominal incision by cutting through the diaphragm. It's a delicate procedure, reaching up into the chest without disturbing the heart. You pull them out, to spongy, surprisingly lightweight organs, and add them to the collection in the bowl. This process is the core of evisceration, a technique known and practiced across millennia of Egyptian history. Removing these water and bacteria-rich organs was the most crucial step in preventing the torso from putrefying from the inside out. The 4 organs you have removed, the liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines, are not to be discarded. They are considered essential for the deceased to live again in the afterlife. They will undergo their own separate preservation process. As you work, you notice something curious. Your father is extremely careful to remove all the major organs, but he seems to completely ignore others. The kidneys, for instance, are often left in place. You catch a glimpse of them, nestled deep against the back wall of the body. You learn a fascinating and somewhat puzzling piece of trivia, for reasons that are still not entirely clear to modern Egyptologists. The kidneys were not considered important and were usually left inside the body. Was it because of their location, deep in the retroperitoneal space, making them harder to remove? Or was there some religious or symbolic reason that has been lost to time? It's a small but persistent mystery. While you are carefully placing the last lung into the bowl, another apprentice comes over and begins the process of cleaning the collected viscera. He washes them thoroughly with palm wine, just as you wash the body, rinsing away any remaining contents and killing surface bacteria. After they are cleaned, he packs them in a large quantity of the same natron salt you were grinding earlier. beginning their own 40-day journey of desiccation. There is, however, an ongoing academic debate concerning this part of the process. While the ideal procedure, described in texts and seen in the finest royal mummies, involves the careful removal and separate preservation of these four specific organs, archaeological reality is often messier. In many non-royal mummies, the organs seem to have been removed hastily, sometimes with other bits and pieces like the spleen or diaphragm mixed in. In some periods, the preserved organs, after being dried, were wrapped in linen and actually placed back inside the body cavity before the final wrapping, rather than being put in canopic jars. In other cases, especially in later periods, the administration was done poorly or not at all. Scholars are constantly re-evaluating the standard procedure, realizing it was more of a gold standard that was not always met. You have done it. You have emptied the body cavity. Your arms are stained to the elbows. The bowl beside you is filled with what was once the source of men, NAS breath and nourishment. You feel a strange sense of accomplishment mixed with a profound sense of awe at the fragility of the human body. You look inside the now empty torso. It is a hollowed-out vessel, but it is not entirely empty. One organ, the most important of all, remains exactly where it was, a silent, dark jewel in the center of the chest. You stare into the hollowed-out cavity of NAS chest. Amidst the shadows, you can just make out the shape of the heart, nestled in its protective sac. The puricadromus. Your father had been so careful when you were removing the lungs, constantly reminding you, do not touch the heart. Leave the heart. Now you understand why. While the brain was discarded as useless stuffing and the other organs were removed for separate keeping, the heart was the one organ that was almost invariably left in place. Your father sees you looking undecided. It's time for a crucial lesson. He wipes his hands on a resin-stained cloth and kneels beside you. Everything a man is in his heart, he says, his voice low and serious. His memories, his character, his wisdom, his emotions. It is the seat of his intelligence, not the head. This is a central tenet of ancient Egyptian belief, a piece of mainstream knowledge that underpins their entire worldview. The heart, or id, was not just a pump for blood. It was the core of a person's identity and consciousness. He explains that in the afterlife, the heart would be the key to passing the final judgment. The deceased would be led by the god Anubis into the Hall of Two Truths. There, their heart would be weighed on a great scale against the feather of Mat, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic order. If the heart was lighter than the feather, it meant the person had lived a righteous life, and they would be granted passage into the paradise of the field of reeds. But if the heart was heavy with sins, if it was weighed down by lies, theft, or evil deeds, it would tip the scales. The terrifying creature, a monstrous hybrid named MMIT, the devourer of the dead, would be waiting to eat the heart, and the soul of the deceased would be condemned to oblivion, to a second and final death. This is why your job is so critical. Preserving the heart within the body ensures that the deceased arrives at their final judgment whole. To remove it would be to rob them of their testimony, to deny them their chance at eternity. As he speaks, the lector priest's chants shift, the words now focusing on the protection of the Ib, imploring it not to speak against the deceased during the judgment. You realize some of the spells written on funerary amulets and papi are essentially pleas to one's own heart, saying, "O my heart, do not stand as a witness against me." While cleaning the area around the heart, you learn a strange little fact. Sometimes, if the heart was accidentally removed or damaged during the evisceration process, the Embalmers had a backup plan. They would create a substitute, most famously a heart-shaped amulet carved from stone, called a heart scarab. This scarab, often made of a dark green or black stone like serpentine or steedet, would be inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead, Chapter 30b, to be precise, which contained that very plea to the heart. This amulet would then be placed within the mummy's bandages, right over the chest, to magically function as the real heart in the afterlife. It was a form of divine insurance. The academic world, still has questions about the heart's role. For example, while the ideal was to leave the heart in place, CT scans of some mummies show that the heart is missing. Was this an accident? A case of sloppy work by an apprentice like you? Or were there specific, unknown circumstances under which the heart was deliberately removed? Furthermore, some Egyptologists debate whether the Egyptians truly saw no function for the brain, while it was clearly not valued like the heart. Some medical papiers show a sophisticated, albeit limited, understanding of cranial injuries. The decision to discard the brain seems to have been a purely religious or philosophical one, a conclusion that the brain was simply not part of the eternal self, rather than a result of complete ignorance of its function. The prevailing belief, however, remains that the heart was king. Your father finishes his lesson. We protect the heart, he says, so it may speak the truth for Minna when the time comes. He hands you a bowl of fresh palm wine and a clean sponge. The next step is to cleanse the now empty cavity where the other organs once resided. You have removed the potential for decay. You have protected the seat of the soul. Now, you must purify the vessel itself, preparing it for the next transformative stage of its journey. You dip the sponge, the wine cool against your stained hands, and begin to wash the inside of the man, a task you couldn't have even imagined yesterday. While you are carefully cleaning the inside of man and AS empty torso, another apprentice, an older boy named Keenan, is tending to the bowl of organs you removed earlier. They have been washed with palm wine and are now being packed in natron. But they are not just jumbled together. They are being prepared for their own special eternal homes, a set of 4 containers known as canopic jars. Your father sees you watching Keenan and decides it's a good time to explain this crucial part of the process. He leads you over to a shelf where a finished set of jars for another client is waiting. They are beautiful, crafted from luminous alabaster, their lids carved into for distinct shapes. He points to each one in turn, explaining its significance. These are not just jars, he says. They are the guardians of the viscera. Each one is protected by a specific god, one of the 4 sons of Horus. This is a fundamental piece of Egyptian funerary belief. The organs were considered so vital that they needed their own divine protectors for the afterlife journey. Your father picks up the first jar. Its lid is carved into the shape of a human head. This is Imset. He explains. He is the guardian of the liver. He, in turn, is protected by the goddess Isis. He sets it down and picks up the second jar, which has the head of a baboon. This is Happy, the guardian of the lungs. He is protected by the goddess Nephthys. The third jar has the head of a jackal, a creature you know well as the symbol of Anubis. This is Amutef, the guardian of the stomach. He is under the protection of the goddess Neith. Finally, he shows you the 4th jar, with the head of a falcon, and this is Suan, the guardian of the intestines. He is watched over by the goddess Ses, dear Qet. You try to memorize the names and the associations. Imset for the liver, Happy for the lungs, Amutef for the stomach, and Suan for the intestines. Human, baboon, jackal, falcon. It's a lot to take in, but you understand the system. Each organ has its guardian, and each guardian has a divine sponsor. It's a complex web of protection, ensuring every part of the deceased is accounted for and kept safe. As you are examining the beautifully carved lids, you learn a quirky historical tidbit. The classic set of 4 animal and human-headed lids that we are so familiar with wasn't always the standard. In earlier periods of Egyptian history, particularly in the Old and Early Middle Kingdoms, the canopic jar lids were often simple, flat lids or, more commonly, all for work art with the head of the deceased, like for identical human-headed jars. The iconic set of the 4 sons of Horus only became the standardized convention later on, during the New Kingdom. It's a great example of how even the most seemingly timeless traditions evolved over the centuries. The debate among Egyptologists here is subtle but interesting. It concerns the organ god pairings. For the most part, the associations your father just taught you are consistent across thousands of texts and artifacts. However, occasionally, archaeologists find a set of canopic jars where the contents don't match the lids. For instance, They might find the stomach inside the baboon-headed jar. Happy's jar, meant for the lungs. Are these simple mistakes made by a tired or careless Embalmer? Or do they represent a lesser-known local tradition, or a change in belief during a specific period that we don't fully understand yet? It's a reminder that even with a system that seems so rigid and dogmatic, human error and variation were always possible. Kainan finishes packing the organs in salt and places them carefully into for plain clay pots for the desiccation period. The beautiful carved jars are for the final product. For now, the organs begin their long 40-day bath in the drying salt, just as the body will. Once they are dried and shrunken, they will be anointed with oils, wrapped in linen strips, and then, finally, placed inside their respective, divinely headed canopic jars. Your father directs you back to Man's body. The lesson is over. You have finished the initial cleaning of the interior cavity. The organs are being cared for. The heart is secure. The entire inside of the torso is now glistening with palm wine, awaiting the next step. It's time for a deeper, more thorough cleansing before the real preservation begins. The initial, superficial cleaning is done. Now it's time for a deep clean. Man's body is an empty vessel, but it's a vessel that still contains residual fluids and tissues that could harbor decay. Your task now is to scour it, to purify it so thoroughly that it becomes a worthy and lasting home for his returning soul. Your father hands you a bundle of rough linen cloths. He gestures to the large amphora of palm wine and then to a collection of smaller jars containing crushed spices, rinse, scour, and perfume. He instructs, the inside must be as clean as the outside. You begin by taking one of the cloths, soaking it in palm wine, and reaching back inside the abdominal cavity. This time, your work is more vigorous. You scrub the interior walls of the chest and abdomen, removing any remaining blood and small fragments of tissue. The wine acts as both a solvent and a disinfectant. The work is physically demanding, requiring you to put your arm deep inside the incision, feeling your way in the dark. You work by touch alone, ensuring you've cleaned every surface, from the curve of the rib cage down to the bowl of the pelvis. After the scrubbing, you take large gourds filled with more palm wine and simply pour them inside, flushing the entire cavity out. The wine, now tinged with pink, runs down the slanted table and into the collection basin at the floor. You do this several times until the wine runs clear. This part of the process is a well-documented step, mentioned by historians like Herodotus. The goal was to use the wine's alcohol content to kill as much bacteria as possible before the drying phase began. Once the cavity is flushed clean, the perfuming begins. You take handfuls of a coarse, fragrant mixture from another jar. It's a blend of crushed myrrh, cashew, and other aromatic herbs and spices. Your father tells you to rub this mixture all over the inside of the cavity. The abrasive texture of the crushed spices provides another level of scouring, while their potent, resinous scents are meant to overpower any lingering odors of decay and, more importantly, to please the gods. The smell is incredibly strong, a rich, earthy, and sweet perfume that fills the air around you. While you are working, you learn a fascinating and slightly less glamorous fact. Not all the materials used for this stuffing were expensive. Imported spices, for a less wealthy client, the embalmers would often use more common and cheaper materials. This could include things like sawdust, which would help absorb any remaining moisture, or even something as humble as onions. Onions, with their strong antibacterial properties and potent smell, were seen as a powerful purifying agent. In fact, the mummy of the great pharaoh Ramesses I was found with small onions placed in his eye sockets and ears. There's a debate among scholars about the exact recipe for this temporary stuffing. While texts mention things like myrrh and cassia, they rarely give precise quantities or a full list of ingredients. Was there a standard, secret recipe passed down through generations of embalmers? Or was it more like cooking, where each master embalmer had his own preferred blend of spices and materials, adjusted based on the client's budget and the specific needs of the body? The analysis of resins and plant matter found inside mummies is an ongoing field of research, constantly revealing new ingredients and challenging old assumptions. Finally, after a thorough scouring and perfuming, you pack the cavity loosely with temporary bundles of linen to help it keep its shape and to absorb any last traces of internal moisture. The body is now as clean on the inside as it is on the outside. Every trace of the corruptible, mundane world has been washed away and replaced with the purifying sense of wine and spice. You stand back and look at your work. The body of Mena is no longer just a body. It has been transformed through a series of meticulous, ritualized actions. It is a purified vessel, but it is still soft, still vulnerable to the passage of time. The most critical and transformative stage is yet to come. Your father gestures towards the huge pile of grayish-white salt crystals in the corner of the workshop. The Natra. It is time to surrender Mena to the salt, to begin the long, slow process that will truly defeat decay. The workshop shifts its energy. The frenetic, precise, and messy work of the restoration and cleansing is over. Now begins a period of quiet, watchful waiting. But first, you must create the environment for the magic to happen. Your father directs you and the other apprentices to a large, raised, bench-like structure in a drier, more ventilated part of the bed. It's essentially a shallow, rectangular bed made of stone or wood. Your first task is to create a thick base layer of natron on this bed. You use wide wooden scoops to transfer the coarse, grayish-white crystals from the main pile. The natron is cool and slightly damp to the touch, and it has a sharp, clean, salty smell. You spread it out, creating a bed several inches deep. This bed will be Mena's home for the next 40 days. This is the absolute core of the mummification process, the single most important scientific principle the Egyptians mastered. Desiccation. By surrounding the body with a powerful hygroscopical agent, a substance that actively draws out and absorbs moisture, they could halt the natural process of decomposition. Bacteria and fungi, the microscopic agents of decay, need water to survive and multiply. By removing the water from the body's tissues, you effectively stop them in their tracks. This is the mainstream, undisputed science behind the ancient art. Once the bed of salt is prepared, you and 3 other apprentices carefully lift Mena's body from the embalming table. He is lighter now, having been emptied of his organs, but it is still a delicate process. You place him gently onto the bed of natron, laying him on his back. His skin immediately looks stark and pale against the gray salt. Now, the real work begins. You are given a simple instruction. Cover him completely. You take your wooden scoop in to begin piling the natron all around the body. You pack it tightly against his sides, his legs, his arms. Another apprentice is carefully packing the now empty body cavity with bags of natron. These bags, made of linen, are pushed deep inside the chest and abdomen to ensure the body dries from the inside out as well as from the outside in. This internal packing is crucial for a thorough desiccation. You learn a small but clever trick of the trade. Special attention is paid to the fingers and toes to ensure these small extremities dry properly and don't curl up unnaturally. They are often individually wrapped or separated with small pads of linen before being buried in the salt. It's another example of the meticulous attention to detail required to preserve a lifelike form. As you work, piling on what seems like a mountain of salt, a question arises, one that historians and chemists still debate. How exactly did the natron work? We know it dehydrated the body, but it also had other effects. Natron is a mix of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, creating a highly alkaline environment. This high pH is extremely hostile to bacteria, effectively creating a sterile field. Furthermore, the salt mixture would have saponified some of the body's fats, turning them into a hard, waxy, soap-like substance known as a dip-OC-array, which further aided in preservation. The debate centers on the precise chemical interactions, in which aspect, the dehydration, the high pH, or the saponification, was the most critical part of the process. The answer is likely that all 3 worked in concert. a perfect chemical storm for preservation that the Egyptians discovered through centuries of trial and error. Finally, Mena is completely submerged. You can no longer see him. He is just a human-shaped mound in a bed of salt. A small clay tablet with his name and the date is placed at the head of the mound. Now, all you can do is wait. The salt will do its work, silently, relentlessly drawing out the water from every cell of his body. Your father explains that the body will remain here for 40 days. Not 39, not 41, 40. The number is significant. It's tied to the astronomical period when the star Sirius, which the Egyptians associated with the goddess Isis, disappeared from the sky. It was a period of mourning and transition in the cosmos. And so it was for the dead. The workshop falls quiet. The body is stable, protected. The organs are in their own neutron bath. The tools are cleaned and put away. The frantic energy is gone, replaced by a patient calm. The most dramatic part of your job is over. Now, you enter the long, slow, middle phase of the 70-day journey. The 40 days of waiting are not a vacation. The Wabet is still a functioning workshop, and the 70-day process is staggered. While Mena lies silently under his mountain of salt, another client might be brought in for their initial purification. A third might be in the final stages of wrapping. The cycle of life, death, and eternal preparation never stops. Your work continues, but the focus shifts from the dramatic and visceral to the quiet and preparatory. You spend many of these days doing the less glamorous, but equally essential tasks. You are back at the mortar and pestle, but this time you're not just grinding natron. You are grinding chunks of dark, fragrant tree resin into a fine powder. This powder will later be mixed with oils to create a thick, varnish-like liquid used to seal the mummy's bandages. The air fills with the sharp, pine-like scent of it. Your main task during this waiting period, however, is preparing the linen. This is the single most used material in the entire process, and an enormous quantity is required for each mummy. A well-wrapped mummy could use hundreds of square yards of fabric. As you learn it during the negotiation, not all of it was new. Your father shows you how to sort the linen that has been provided by men in A.S. family. You separate the old tunics, the worn household sheets, and other pieces of used cloth. Your job is to wash it, bleach it in the sun until it is a uniform white, and then, most painstakingly, tear it into long, narrow strips of varying widths. This is a core skill for an apprentice. The strips must be of a consistent width, and the edges must be relatively neat to ensure a smooth, even wrapping later on. Use it for hours in the sun-drenched yard behind the Wabet, the rhythmic sound of tearing cloth becoming the soundtrack to your days. You create huge piles of these linen bandages, sorting them by width and quality. The finest, newest linen will be used for the outer layers, the parts that will be seen. The older, coarser material will be used for the inner layers and for padding. This practical, hierarchical use of materials is a key aspect of the craft. During this time, you learn a fascinating and often overlooked fact about the bandages. Sometimes, the linen used was not just old clothing but came from a very specific source. The temples. As part of their religious duties, people would donate linen to the temples as offerings to the gods. Over time, the temples would accumulate vast quantities of this fabric to clear out their storerooms. They would sell or donate this used, blessed linen to the embalmers. Thus, a person could be wrapped in cloth that had already been sanctified through temple service, adding another layer of magical protection to their burial. Your father also tasks you with preparing the amulets. He has a collection of molds made from fired clay. You learn to mix a paste of faience, a type of quartz-based ceramic, and press it into these molds. The molds are in the shape of important protective symbols. The DJ and pillar, representing stability and the backbone of the god Osiris. The Tia, or Isis knot, a symbol of protection. The Ankh, the famous symbol of life. And of course, the scarab beetle, representing rebirth and regeneration. After you shape them, you fire them in a small kiln, and they emerge with a beautiful, glassy, blue-green finish. These small, Magical objects will be tucked into the mummy's wrappings at specific locations to provide targeted protection. There's an ongoing debate among Egyptologists about the precise function and placement of these amulets. While major texts like the Book of the Dead give instructions for some of them, like the heart scarab, the placement of dozens of other smaller amulets seems to vary. Was there a strict map for amulet placement on the body? Or was it left to the discretion of the Hiritep, the lector priest? Did the number and type of amulets depend on the budget of the family? Or were they determined by the specific spiritual dangers the deceased was expected to face in the afterlife? The inconsistencies found on different mummies suggest a flexible system rather than a rigid, universal one. The 40 days pass slowly, marked by the rhythm of tearing cloth and the heat of the kiln. You watch the mound of natron, knowing that a profound transformation is happening within. You are not just waiting. You are preparing for the final, artistic phase of your work. You are gathering the materials that will turn a dried-out husk back into the recognizable, eternal form of Mena the scribe. The salt is nearing the end of its work. Soon, it will be time to unveil the results. On the morning of the 40th day, a different kind of energy returns to the wabed. The lector priest is present. Your father is focused, and the apprentices move with quiet anticipation. The time has come. You and Kainan are given wide, fan-like brushes made of reeds. Your job is to carefully sweep away the mountain of natron that has been Mena's world for over a month. As you brush away the top layers, the salt feels different. It's no longer the dry, coarse crystal you piled on. It's heavy, damp, and clumpy, having absorbed a significant amount of liquid from the body. It's also darker, stained by the body fluids it has drawn out. You work slowly, carefully, so as not to damage the fragile skin underneath. First, the curve of a shoulder emerges, then the shape of a leg. Finally, the entire body is uncovered. The transformation is shocking. The man you placed in the salt is gone. In his place lies a figure that is both recognizable and utterly alien. Mena's body is now incredibly stiff, thin, and lightweight. His skin, once soft and pale, has become a dark, leathery, and wrinkled hide, stretched taut over his bones. He has shrunken significantly, a testament to the vast amount of water that has been removed from his tissues. This is the goal, the physical state of being that can endure for millennia. Mainstream Egyptology confirms that this dramatic weight and volume loss was a key indicator of a successful desiccation. You and the other apprentices carefully lift the body from the salt bed. It feels strangely hollow and fragile, like a dried-out gourd. You carry it back to the main embalming table, which has been freshly cleaned. The lector priest begins a new series of chants, prayers of rebirth and regeneration, celebrating the successful completion of this crucial phase. Your next task is to clean the body of all the residual natron. You use your reed brushes to whisk away any salt clinging to the skin. Then you use dry linen cloths to wipe it down meticulously. Special care is taken with the body cavities. The natron-filled linen bags are removed from the torso. Then you must reach inside to brush out any loose salt crystals that remain. The same is done for the cranial cavity, using long, thin tools to clear it out through the nostrils. The body must be completely free of the salt before the next stage can begin. During this cleaning process, you discover a rather unpleasant but necessary trick of the trade. Sometimes, the long immersion in the salt could cause the body to become excessively stiff in an awkward position. To make the limbs pliable enough for the final wrapping, an apprentice might have to break the joints of the elbows or knees. It sounds brutal, but it was a practical measure to ensure the body could be arranged in the proper, dignified, Osiris-like pose, with arms crossed over the chest. It's a small, grim detail that is rarely depicted in tomb paintings, but is evident in the physical remains of some mummies. The exact length of the desiccation period is a subject of some scholarly discussion, while the number 40 days is oft uncited in relation to the religious symbolism of the star Sirius. The actual time a body spent in natron likely varied. Was it always exactly 40 days? Or was this a symbolic number, Could the time be shortened in the dry season or extended during the more humid inundation period? Some researchers argue that the 70-day total period was the fixed constant, and the time spent in the salt versus the time spent on wrapping could be flexible. A client who paid less might get fewer days in the salt and a quicker wrapping job. It's a practical question that the idealized religious texts don't answer. By the end of the day, man's body is clean, dry, and empty. It is a preserved human shell, but it doesn't look right. It looks like a shrunken, withered thing, not the idealized, godlike form that is supposed to enter the afterlife. The craft of the Embalmer is not just about preservation, it's about restoration. Your work is far from over. The next phase will be all about artifice and delusion, about using oils, resins, and linen to rebuild what the salt has taken away, to transform this leathery huskback into a recognizable human form, ready for its eternal journey. The body is preserved, but it is not yet perfected. It is stiff, hollow, and leathery. Your father explains that the goal now is to restore a semblance of life and flexibility to the form. The next stage is a luxurious, fragrant process, the anointing with oils. This is not just a single coating, but a lengthy, multi-day ritual of massaging the skin with a succession of sacred and expensive unguents. An apprentice brings over several clay pots containing different oils and resins. The first one you use is a relatively simple palm oil. It serves as a base coat, a way to start rehydrating the very outer layers of the parched skin. You dip a linen pad into the warm, fragrant oil and begin to rub it gently onto man's arms and legs. The dried skin seems to drink it in, its dark, leathery color deepening to a richer, more lustrous brown. Your father demonstrates the technique. It's not just a simple wipe down, it's a massage. You must rub the oil deep into the skin, working it into the wrinkles and folds. This process serves several purposes. Practically, it makes the skin more supple and less prone to cracking during the wrapping process. Symbolically, it is an act of purification and revitalization. In Egyptian belief, fragrant oils were considered divine, a substance that pleased the gods and was a sign of high status and purity. This anointing is a key part of transforming the corpse into a divine being. After the initial coat of palm oil, you move on to more precious substances. The most important of these is cedar oil, imported at great expense from the mountains of Lebanon. Its sharp, clean, woody scent fills the workshop. Cedar oil was prized not only for its fragrance but also for its known preservative properties. It's a natural insect repellent and has antifungal qualities. You apply it with the same meticulous care, ensuring every inch of the body is coated. During this process, you learn a strange little detail about the lengths to which embalmers would go to create a lifelike appearance. Sometimes, to make the skin feel more supple and to add a bit of bulk back to the shrunken frame, they would slip pads of linen or even small plates of metal under the skin. This was done through small, discreet incisions. For instance, a small metal plate might be slipped under the skin of the cheek to give it a fuller, more natural contour. It was a form of ancient cosmetic surgery, a trick to improve the final appearance of the mummy. This anointing process could take several days. The body would be coated, left to absorb the oils, and then coated again with a different mixture, perhaps one containing myrrh or frankincense. The letter priest would be present for much of this, reciting spells to consecrate the oils and imbue them with magical protective power. The exact composition of these anointing oils is a subject of intense scientific and historical debate. While ancient texts provide names like oil of Syria or cedar oil, identifying the precise botanical sources is challenging. Modern chemical analysis of residues found on mummies has identified a complex cocktail of ingredients, including plant oils, animal fats, beeswax, and various tree resins. The recipe seems to vary significantly by dynasty and social class. It seems there was no single sacred oil, but rather a whole pharmacopoeia of anointing substances, the specifics of which were a closely guarded secret of the embalming workshop. As you work the fragrant oils into man's shrunken limbs, you see a subtle change. The skin becomes less like brittle leather and more like polished wood. It has a soft sheen in the lamplight. The process is restorative, not just physically, but aesthetically. You are not just preserving a body, you are beautifying it. You are preparing it for its grand debut in the Hall of Two Truths. The hollow shell is slowly being imbued with the sentient substance of divinity. But the illusion of life is not yet complete. The body is still sunken and empty. The next step is to give it back its form, to rebuild its substance from the inside out. The anointing has made Men's skins upland fragrant, but his body is still a deflated version of its former self. The sunken chest, the hollow abdomen, the gauntness of his limbs, it all speaks of absence. Your next task is to correct this, to restore the body's volume and shape, so that his beyond Ka will find a familiar and dignified home. This is the stage of stuffing on sculpting. Your father directs you to a pile of materials you helped prepare during the long 40-day wait. There are heaps of clean linen scraps, bags of dry sawdust, and even some dried moss and chaff. These are your filling materials. He hands you a long, smooth wooden stick, like a dowel, and instructs you to begin with the torso. You take large wads of linen and, through the incision on his left side, begin to pack the empty body cavity. This is a more artistic process than you might think. You can't just shove the material in randomly. You have to pack it carefully and firmly, pushing it up into the chest to support the rib cage and down into the pelvis, recreating the gentle curve of a full belly. You use the wooden stick to push the stuffing into the hard-to-reach places, ensuring there are no lumps or empty pockets. It's like being a sculptor, but your medium is a human body and your tools are linen and sawdust. This careful internal packing is a well-known feature of high-quality mummification, essential for creating a robust and shapely final form. Once the main torso is filled and feels solid, you and your father carefully stitch the incision closed. You use a large bronze needle and strong linen thread. The stitches are neat and tight, a testament to the care taken even on parts of the body that will soon be hidden forever under layers of bandages. But the work isn't finished. The face is gaunt. The cheeks are hollow. Your father shows you how to take very small, fine packets of linen or sawdust and, using a delicate pair of bronze forceps, push them into the mouth. You carefully pack the cheeks from the inside, slowly pushing them out until they regain a natural, lifelike fullness. It's a delicate balance. Too little and the face looks skeletal. Too much and it looks puffy and distorted. Here you learn a bizarre but fascinating trick of the trade. Sometimes, for very high-status individuals, more unusual materials were used for the subcutaneous packing. The most famous example is the mummy of Pharaoh Ramesses III, whose restorers found that his limbs had been packed with a mixture of mud and sawdust, and his cheeks stuffed with balls of linen, all inserted through small, hidden incisions to create a more muscular and imposing physique for his journey into the afterlife. It was the ultimate commitment to faking it till you make it to the field of reeds. The debate among Egyptologists on this topic revolves around consistency. While many royal mummies from the New Kingdom show extensive and skillful use of this subcutaneous packing, mummies from other periods or of lower status often lack it entirely. Was this practice a temporary fad, popular only during a specific era of embalming, or was it simply a premium service, too time-consuming and expensive for the average client like Minna? The evidence suggests that while restoring the outer contour was always a goal, the methods and extent to which it was done were highly variable. Finally, you stand back and look at Minna. The transformation is remarkable. He is no longer a shrunken, emaciated figure. He has substance again. His chest is broad. His limbs are full. His cheeks are no longer hollow. He looks like a man sleeping, not a desiccated corpse. You have preserved the body from decay, anointed it with sacred oils, and now you have restored its form. The physical preparation of the vessel is nearly complete, but there are a few final, artistic touches to be made to the face, the part of the body that holds the identity, before you can begin the great, final act of wrapping. With the body beautifully reshaped, the final touches are focused on the face. the most personal and recognizable part of the deceased. This is the face his Khan BA will be looking for. It needs to be perfect. Your father explains that a mummy should not look dead, but rather divinely asleep, waiting to awaken in the next world. Your first task is to deal with the eyes. During the desiccation process, the eyeballs would have shrunken and collapsed into their sockets, leaving dark, empty-looking hollows. This will not do. Your father gives you two small, smooth, white stones, carefully selected to be the size of human eyeballs. More commonly, you learn, small, flattened bundles of linen or even onions were used. You gently push these placeholder eyes into the sockets, under the closed eyelids. Immediately, the face looks more natural, the skin of the eyelids now resting on a solid, rounded shape instead of sinking into a void. Next comes the real artistry. For wealthier clients, this is where artificial eyes would be inserted. This is a well-known practice for some of the most famous royal mummies. These weren't just simple stones. They were elaborate creations made of painted stone or faience, sometimes with obsidian for the pupils, designed to give the mummy a startlingly lifelike gaze. While MAN's budget doesn't extend to this luxury, the principle is the same. The eyes must appear full. Then, you are handed a small pot of pigment and a fine red brush. The pigment is kohl, the black eyeliner used by both men and women throughout Egypt. You carefully paint the characteristic almond-shaped outline around Man's eyes and extend the line towards his temples. You even paint on a set of delicate, dark eyebrows. This isn't just for beautification. It's to give the face the iconic, idealized look of a divine being. The gods in temple paintings all have these perfectly defined eyes. You are making Mana look like a god. You also learn a strange and intimate detail of the embalmer's craft. Sometimes, the mummy would be given hair. If the deceased was bald or their hair was thin, a wig made of human hair, often braided and set with beeswax, would be placed on the head. For Mina, his own hair has been preserved well by the Natron, so you simply clean it and perhaps rub a little scented beeswax through it to keep it in place. The attention to detail is incredible. The use of makeup on mummies leads to an interesting debate among scholars. Was the application of cosmetics purely symbolic, a way to make the deceased conform to a divine ideal, or was it also deeply personal, an attempt to make the mummy look as he did in life? For example, if a woman was known for a particular style of makeup, would her embalmers try to replicate it? Similarly, some mummies have been found with traces of red ochre on their lips and cheeks, a form of ancient blush. It raises the question of whether the final look was a standardized, divine template or a personalized portrait. The answer is likely a bit of both, blending religious convention with a desire to preserve individual identity. Finally, your father inspects your work. The face is transformed, with the hollows filled, the eyes defined by kohl, and the skin glowing from its oil treatment. Mena looks regal and peaceful. He looks ready to be presented in the court of Osiris. The body is now a finished piece of preserved art. The vessel is ready. In the corner of the workshop, you can see the massive piles of linen strips you prepared weeks ago. You see the small, faience amulets gleaming on a tray. You see the pot of thick, black resin warming over a small charcoal burner. All the components are ready. The final, epic stage of the process, the one that will consume more time and material than any other, is about to begin. It's time to wrap the mummy. The atmosphere in the Wabbit shifts once more. The preparatory stages are complete. The next 15 days, your father tells you, will be dedicated almost entirely to one task, wrapping. This is not a simple case of rolling the body in a few sheets. It is a complex, ritualized process of layering, binding, and embedding magical protections, transforming the body into a secure and sacred bundle. Before the first strip of linen is laid, there is a final consecration. The lector priest steps forward and holds his hands over Man's body, reciting a long litany to sanctify it for the wrapping. He anoints the body one last time with fragrant oil, his voice echoing in the quiet workshop. This moment marks the transition from preparing the body to sealing it away for eternity. Your father directs you and Keenan to the enormous piles of linen strips you spent so many days tearing and rolling. The sheer quantity is staggering. A single mummy could require over 400 square yards of linen, a testament to the importance placed on this final stage. You bring the rolls to the embalming table, sorting them by width. The narrowest strips are for the fingers and toes, while wider ones are for the limbs and torso. This hierarchical application of bandages is a key, mainstream element of the wrapping process. You also bring over the tray of faience amulets you made, each one glowing with its blue-green glaze. The heart scarab, however, is treated with special reverence. It is larger, made of a dark green stone, and its underside is flat, ready for the crucial inscription. The Charity EP, the priest, takes the scarab and a sharp tool and carefully scratches the hieroglyphs for chapter 30b of the Book of the Dead into its base, the spell that commands the heart not to betray its owner at the final judgment. Here, you learn a fascinating and slightly thrifty piece of trivia about the wrapping process. The linen, as you know, was often recycled, but sometimes the embalmers or the family would write notes or tallies on the linen strips. Archaeologists have found bandages that were clearly cut from old administrative documents, with traces of hieratic script still visible. More touchingly, sometimes a family member would write a short message of farewell or a prayer on one of the inner bandages, a final, secret message to their loved one hidden within the layers. The question of where all this linen came from is a subject of ongoing academic research. While we know some came from household collections and temple donations, the sheer volume needed for the thousands of mummies created over the centuries is immense. Was there a dedicated industry for producing mummy linen? Did the state subsidize it for certain officials? Scholars analyze the weave, quality, and markings on mummy bandages to try and trace their origins, piecing together the vast, hidden economy that supplied the afterlife. The body is ready. The materials are assembled. Your father takes the first, very fine strip of linen. He dips it into a warm, slightly sticky solution of resin and oil. This will help the bandages adhere to each other, creating a hard, protective shell. He looks at men NAS, right-handed, with immense care, begins to wrap the thumb. The great work of cocooning has begun. You watch, ready to assist, knowing that for the next 2 weeks, your entire world will be the steady, rhythmic motion of wrapping, turning this carefully prepared body into a timeless, sacred object. The journey inward is over. The journey of sealing it away is about to start. The wrapping begins in earnest, and it is a process of almost mind-numbing repetition and intense focus. Your father starts with the extremities, a well-documented and standard procedure. He takes the narrowest strips of resin-soaked linen and begins to wrap each of NAS fingers and toes individually. It is slow, meticulous work. Each digit must be separately cocooned, preserving its individual shape, before the hand or foot is wrapped as a whole. This ensures the final form doesn't look like a simple flipper, but retains a detailed, human quality. You are tasked with holding the limbs steady and handing your father fresh strips of linen as he needs them. As he finishes wrapping the fingers of the right hand, he pauses. He picks up a small, ring-shaped faience amulet and carefully tucks it between the linen folds over the knuckles. He murmurs a short prayer for the protection of the hand. This is how the magic is woven in. The wrapping is not just a physical act. It's a ritual of embedding protection layer by layer. After the digits, he wraps the hands and feet, then the arms and legs. The limbs are wrapped separately at first, building up layers and making them thick and cylindrical. Only then are they bound to the body. You learn to wrap the legs first, then position the arms. For a man like Minna, the arms are typically crossed over his chest in the classico-cirrus pose, a posture of regal stillness and rebirth. Once positioned, the arms are secured to the torso with more bandages. As the layers build up, the body starts to lose its specific human shape and becomes a more generalized, cocoon-like form. At various stages, the lector priest will intervene. He might place a papyrus scroll with sacred text on the chest before it's covered, or tuck specific amulets into the wrappings over the vital organs. The most important of these is the heart scarab. After the first few layers of bandages have covered the chest, your father takes the heavy stone scarab. The priest recites the powerful spell inscribed on its base, and then it is carefully placed directly over where Men's heart lies beneath. It is then immediately covered with more linen, sealing its magic within. During this long process, you learn a strange but practical detail. To ensure the mummy had a perfectly symmetrical, idealized shape, the wrappers would use pads of linen to correct any imperfections. If one shoulder was slightly lower than the other, they would stuff a wad of linen under the bandages to even it out. If the hips were uneven, they would add padding. They were essentially sculpting with bandages, refining the form as they went. The final, smooth, slightly impersonal shape of a mummy is not just the shape of the body underneath, but the result of this careful, artistic padding. There is a significant debate among Egyptologists concerning the wrapping style. It was not uniform across the 3,000 years of pharaonic history. In the Old Kingdom, mummies were often wrapped with less finesse, resulting in a more rigid, less detailed form. The New Kingdom, your current era, is considered the golden age of wrapping, with the individual limb wrapping and meticulous layering you are now performing. In the later Ptolemaic and Roman periods, the focus shifted to the exterior, with incredibly elaborate, almost geometric patterns of bandages forming the outer layers, while the quality of the preservation underneath sometimes declined. The wrapping style is one of the key ways archaeologists can aid a mummy without even unwrapping it. Day after day, you continue this work. The pile of linen strips shrinks, while the form on the table grows thicker, smoother, and more solid. You wrap, you pad, you tuck in an amulet, you wrap some more. The air is thick with the smell of warm resin. The only sounds are the rustle of linen and the low, constant chanting of the priest. You are not just binding a body, you are creating a fortress of cloth and magic, a safe vessel that will carry Minna across the treacherous waters of the underworld to the eternal shores of the Field of Reeds. As you enter the final days of wrapping, the mummy of Minna has become a thick, white, anonymous cocoon. The individual details of his body are long gone, replaced by a smooth, robust, and idealized form. The wrapping process now enters a new and even more sacred phase. It's time to add the final, most powerful layer of magical protection, the written word. Your father signals for a very large, fine linen sheet to be brought over. This is the final shroud. It's a piece of high-quality fabric, much larger than the strips you've been using, intended to envelop the entire body. The lector priest, the Theoretic, takes charge now. His role shifts from chanting to writing. He is given a palette with blackened red ink and a set of fine reed brushes. His task is to inscribe this final shroud with spells from the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead, as you know it, isn't a single book with a cover and a spine. It's the modern name for a collection of almost 200 magic spells, hymns, and prayers designed to help the deceased navigate the afterlife. This is a core concept of Egyptian funerary religion. These spells were a divine roadmap and a cheat sheet for the terrifying trials the soul would face. They provided passwords to pass demonic gatekeepers, words to appease hostile gods, and instructions on how to avoid a second death. The priest begins to paint the hieroglyphs onto the shroud with practiced, elegant strokes. He might write a spell to give the deceased power over air and water in the underworld, or the crucial spell that allows the soul, to reunite with the ka, the life force, and the mummified body. One of the most important images he might draw is a scene of the final judgment, showing the weighing of the heart, a visual reminder and magical guarantee of a successful outcome. As you watch him work, you learn a fascinating and quirky fact about these texts. While we call it the Book of the Dead, the Egyptians themselves had a much more poetic and descriptive name for it, the Book of Coming Forth by Day. This reflects the ultimate goal of all your work, not to dwell in death, but to emerge from the tomb each morning into the light, reborn like the sun god Ra. It was a book about life, not death. The shroud is carefully laid over the mummy, and you help your father wrap it tightly. securing the powerful words against the body. But sometimes, especially for wealthier clients, this wasn't enough. A separate, beautifully illustrated papier scroll containing a much more extensive collection of spells would be prepared. This scroll would then be tucked in among the bandages, often placed between the legs or on the chest. The creation and use of these scrolls is a topic of much scholarly debate. Were they mass-produced, with a blank space left for the deceased's name to be filled in? The evidence suggests yes. For many of them, it was a thriving industry. You could buy a pre-made scroll with standard spells. However, a wealthy individual could commission a custom scroll, choosing specific spells they felt were important for their journey. Some scholars argue about the literacy rates and whether the deceased was ever expected to read the scroll. Most agree that the mere presence of the magical words was enough to make them effective. The magic was inherent in the hieroglyphs themselves, whether they were read or not. With the inscribed shroud in place, the final layers of wrapping commence. These are applied with geometric precision, creating patterns, diamonds, squares, and chevrons that are both beautiful and symbolically meaningful. The mummy is almost complete. It is now not just a preserved body, but a magical artifact, armed with all the divine knowledge and power needed for its great journey. The next and final step in the sealing process will be to make this fortress of linen and magic completely impenetrable. The 70-day process is nearing its climax. The wrapping is complete. The mummy of Mena lies on the table, a masterpiece of linen artistry and embedded magic, but it is still, in essence, the fabric shell. The final step of the physical preparation is to make it waterproof, airtight, and permanent. It's time to apply the resin. Over a charcoal brazier in the corner of the workshop, a large clay pot has been slowly heating. Inside is a thick, black, viscous liquid. It's a mixture of heated tree resins, beeswax, and scented oils. The smell is overpowering. A heavy, tar-like perfume that clings to the back of your throat. This is the final sealant. Your father takes a ladle and scoops some of the molten, bubbling liquid into a smaller bowl. He gives you a stiff, brush-like tool made of palm fibers and instructs you to start painting the hot resin onto the surface of the mummy. You have to work quickly, as the resin cools and hardens fast. You start at the feet and work your way up, applying a thick, generous coat of the black goo over the pristine white linen. The contrast is stark and dramatic. The beautiful, patterned drapings disappear under a layer of glossy blackness. This application of a dark, resinous coating is a hallmark of mummification, especially in the New Kingdom and later periods. Its primary purpose was practical. It created a hard, waterproof carapace that protected the linen and the body from moisture and insects. It sealed the mummy completely, locking in the magic and locking out the decay. When it cooled, it would form a tough, shell-like casing around the body. As you are slathering on the hot liquid, you learn a strange historical fact that created a centuries-long misunderstanding. The word mummy itself comes from this very process. The Arabic word for bitumen or natural asphalt is mumaya. When Arab travelers and scholars in the Middle Ages discovered the ancient tombs, they saw these black, resin-covered bodies. They mistook the dark coating for bitumen and called the bodies mumaya, which was later Latinized to mumia, and eventually became the English word mummy. For a long time, Europeans believed that bitumen was a key ingredient in mummification, and bizarrely, ground-up mummy dust was even used as a form of medicine for centuries, because bitumen was thought to have healing properties. It's a classic case of a mistaken identity shaping language itself. There is, of course, a debate among scientists and Egyptologists about the exact composition of this black goo. Chemical analyses have shown that true bitumen was rarely used, especially in the earlier periods. The mixture was typically a complex cocktail of coniferous resins, plant oils, and beeswax. However, in the much later Greco-Roman period, the use of cheaper, more readily available true bitumen did become more common. Perhaps as a cost-cutting measure when the intricate religious beliefs were beginning to fade. Tracking the changing recipe of this resinous coating is another way scholars can date mummies and understand shifting trade patterns and technologies, you and Kainan work together, covering the entire mummy until not a speck of white linen is visible. The figure on the table is now a black, monolithic form, its human shape still evident but abstracted, like a sculpture carved from obsidian. You leave it to cool and harden. The heat from the resin and the brazier has made the wombat feel like an oven. While the resin sets, your father prepares for the next step. He brings over a magnificent object that has been kept carefully covered in a corner of the workshop. It is a funerary mask, not solid gold like a pharaoh's, but one made of cartonnage, layers of linen and plaster, that has been expertly gilded and painted. It is an idealized, serene face with a golden sheen, a divine countenance for the reborn Mena. The physical work is done. The sealing is complete. It is time to give the god his face. The black, resinous shell of the mummy has cooled and hardened into a solid carapace. The anonymous, dark form now awaits its face, its identity for eternity. Your father carefully lifts the cartonnage mask used all earlier. It is heavier than it looks, a solid piece of craftsmanship. The face is serene and impassive, with the classic large, kohl-rimmed eyes and a small, calm smile. The skin is covered in gold leaf, which shimmers in the lamplight. This is not the face of Mena described, the mortal man. This is the face of a divine being, an Osiris. The use of a funerary mask is one of the most iconic elements of ancient Egyptian burial customs. Its purpose was twofold. First, it was a vital piece of magical protection, safeguarding the head, which was considered the most vulnerable part of the body. Second, and more importantly, it provided an idealized, permanent face for the deceased. Since the real face was now hidden and altered by the mummification process, the mask acted as a perfect, unchanging visage that the soul could easily recognize upon its return. It also magically identified the deceased with the gods, particularly Osiris, the god of the afterlife, who was often depicted with a golden face. Gold, to the Egyptians, was the flesh of the gods. It was eternal and would never tarnish or decay. Your father and the lector priest carefully positioned the mask over the head and shoulders of the mummy. They used fresh linen strips, also coated in resin, to bind the mask securely to the body, blending its edges into the black torso. The effect is instantaneous and powerful. The black, abstract form now has a focal point, a golden face staring calmly up at the ceiling. It is the face of an immortal. While Mena's mask is made of gilded cartonnage, you know from stories and from seeing the materials in the workshop that the materials for masks vary greatly with wealth. The poorest might have had no mask at all, or simply a face crudely painted onto the outer linen wrappings. A middle-class person like Mena would have this beautiful but relatively affordable cartonnage version. The elite and royalty, of course, had masks of solid gold, like the world-famous one of Tutankhamun. Here, you learn a fascinating detail. Even on some of the most spectacular solid gold masks, the eyes are often inlaid with other materials, like lapis lazuli for the eyeliner and obsidian or quartz for the eyeball itself. This combination of materials was not just for beauty, it was deeply symbolic, each substance having its own magical properties. The use and style of funerary masks is a topic of ongoing study. For instance, there's a debate about the Fayum portraits from the much later Roman period in Egypt. In this era, the traditional, stylized three-dimensional mask was replaced in some areas by a hauntingly realistic, two-dimensional portrait of the deceased, painted on a wooden panel and incorporated into the mummy wrappings over the face. Do these lifelike portraits represent a shift in belief, a new emphasis on individual, worldly identity over the traditional, idealized divine form? Or were they simply a blending of Egyptian burial customs with Greco-Roman artistic traditions? It's a powerful example of how this ancient practice continued to evolve, even as the pharaonic age came to a close. With the mask in place, the mummy is essentially complete. It is a preserved body, wrapped in layers of protective linen, armed with magical spells, sealed in a waterproof shell, and given a divine, golden face. It is a perfect vessel for the soul's eternal journey. All that remains is to place it in its final home, Against the wall of the workshop rests Men's coffin. It's a simple, human-shaped, or anthropoid, wooden coffin, painted with images of gods and protective symbols. Your father and the other apprentices prepare to lift the heavy, completed mummy. It is time to unite the body with its coffin, the final act of encapsulation before it is returned to the family. The moment has come to place the finished mummy into its coffin. This is the final act of your work as an embalmer. The last time you will handle the sacred object you have spent 70 days creating. The coffin is not just a box. It is another layer of protection, another symbolic womb from which the deceased will be reborn. Men's coffin is typical for a man of his standing. It's made of sycamore wooden shaped like a human figure with crossed arms, mirroring the Osiris pose of the mummy within. The outside is coated in a layer of white gesso and then painted with vibrant colors. You see images of the 4 sons of Horus, who guard the organs. You see Anubis, the jackal god of embalming, tending to a mummy on a table, a picture of the very work you have just completed. A line of hieroglyphs runs down the center, a prayer for offerings and a good life in the world to come, with Men's name and title. The scribe, Meta, true a voice, written clearly. This declaration, true voice or Maakheru, signifies that he has passed the final judgment. The coffin's art is a magical engine, preemptively declaring his success. You and 3 other apprentices position yourselves around the mummy. It is incredibly heavy now, with the added weight of the linen, resin, and the cartonnage mask. On your father's command, you lift it from the table. It is dense and solid, a single, unyielding object. You move slowly, carefully, across the workshop floor to where the base of the coffin rests onto wooden trestles. With immense care, you lower the mummy into the coffin. It fits perfectly, a testament to the precise measurements taken at the very beginning of the process. For a moment, you stare at the golden face lying in its new wooden home. This practice of using nested coffins is a well-known feature of wealthier burials. While Mene has a single coffin, a high-ranking noble might have 2 or 3, one fitting snugly inside the other like a set of Russian dolls. A pharaoh could have even more, culminating in a massive stone sarcophagus. Each coffin provided an additional layer of physical and magical protection. As you prepare to place the lid, you learn one last, slightly strange detail about the process. Sometimes, small, miscellaneous items would be placed in the coffin around the mummy. These weren't necessarily grand funerary goods. They're small, personal objects, a favorite cosmetic pot, a child's toy, or even, in one famous case, a side of beef. These coffin fillers seem to be a mix of personal mementos and last-minute food offerings for the journey. It's a touching, humanizing detail in a process that can seem so formulaic. The debate among Egyptologists here concerns the coffin's primary function. Was it mainly a protective container to guard the mummy from tomb robbers and environmental damage, or was its primary purpose magical? A symbolic object whose inscriptions and shape were essential for the transformation into a divine being. Most scholars agree it was both, a perfect fusion of the practical and the magical. However, the emphasis may have shifted over time. In some periods, the decoration and spells on the coffin were paramount, while in others, the sheer physical robustness seemed to be the main concern. The heavy lid of the coffin is now brought over. It is also beautifully painted, the face on the lid a stylized mirror of the mask within. You and the others lift it and carefully lower it into place. The golden face of the mummy disappears from view, sealed in the painted darkness. Your father uses small wooden dowels to peg the lid shut, and then the seams might be sealed with a final layer of plaster or resin. It is done. The object you now see is no longer a mummy, but a sarcophagus. Mina is fully encapsulated, protected, and ready. You have done your job. You have cheated decay and built a house for eternity. But there is one final ceremony, one last piece of magic to perform before you can deliver him to his family and his tomb. The body is ready, but it cannot yet see, speak, or hear in the afterlife. It needs to be awakened. Your 70 days of work are complete, but the journey of Mena The scribe is just beginning. The sealed coffin now stands upright, propped against a wall, facing the entrance of the workshop. The family has been summoned. They arrive not with the loud, performative grief of the first day, but with a quiet, reverent awe. They are here to witness the final, and perhaps most vital, ritual, the opening of the mouth ceremony. This ancient rite is the magical culmination of everything you have done. A preserved body is useless if it cannot function in the afterlife. The mummy needs to be able to see the paradise of the field of reeds, to speak the names of the gods, to hear the sacred incantations, and to eat the food offerings that will sustain its ka. The opening of the mouth ceremony is what reanimates the senses of the deceased. This is a core, mainstream belief, depicted in countless tomb paintings on papyrus. The lector priest, the Suru Tep, takes center stage. He is no longer just the chanter or scribe. He is now the embodiment of Horus, performing this rite for his father, Osiris, who is represented by the mummy. He holds a set of special ritual tools. The most important of these is the P/Kef, a uniquely shaped knife, often made of flint or obsidian, that looks a bit like a fishtail. He also has a set of other implements, including a tool shaped like an adze, a carpenter's tool for shaping wood. The priest approaches the painted face on the coffin. The ceremony is performed on the coffin itself, but its magic is believed to transfer directly to the mummy within. He begins by touching the adze to the mouth of the painted face, chanting, "I open for you your mouth." He then touches the eyes, the ears, and the nose, reciting spells to restore each sense. The gestures are symbolic, a divine act of awakening. He then takes the P/Kai, the F knife. Its unique shape is believed to be a throwback to the archaic tool used to cut the umbilical cord of a newborn baby. By touching it to the mummy's mouth, the priest is symbolically enabling the deceased to be reborn, to breathe and speak anew. It is a powerful act, linking physical birth to spiritual rebirth. During the ceremony, you learn a fascinating and slightly unusual detail. The ritual wasn't just for the mummy. It was also performed on the statues of the deceased that would be placed in the tomb. The Egyptians believed that the ka could inhabit these statues as well, so they too needed to be opened on, animated to receive offerings. This shows how deeply the concept of reanimation was embedded in their funerary practices, extending beyond the body itself. The precise origin and meaning of the opening of the mouth tools are a subject of much scholarly debate. The adze seems to be a straightforward symbol of shaping or opening, but the P/Kai by F is much more mysterious. Is the connection to cutting the umbilical cord the correct one? Some scholars have argued it has astronomical significance, or that its fishtail shape relates to other lost myths. Its exact function and symbolism are still not fully understood, making it one of the more enigmatic objects in the Egyptian ritual toolkit. As the ceremony concludes, a calf is sometimes sacrificed, its leg presented as a final offering, symbolizing vitality and strength. The family now looks at the coffin in a new light. It is no longer just a container for their loved one's body. It is a living, breathing entity, a fully equipped vessel for the afterlife. Your father formally presents the coffin to men and his son. Your workshop's sacred duty is fulfilled. The family's men will now take the coffin and begin the funeral procession to the tomb, which has been prepared high in the Taban Hills. There will be a great feast, and the coffin will be placed in its final resting place, surrounded by all the goods Mena will need for eternity. Your part in the story is over. You watch them go, the weight of the last 70 days lifting from your shoulders. The funeral procession for Mena snakes its way up the dusty path toward the necropolis, their chants and prayers slowly fading as they climb the sun-baked hills. The Wabet is suddenly quiet again. The heavy scent of resonant incense still hangs in the air, but the focus of the last 70 days is gone. You stand in the doorway, watching the last of the mourners disappear over a ridge. A strange mix of pride and emptiness settles over you. You turn back to the workshop. It looks different now. The central embalming table is empty, already being scrubbed clean by another apprentice. The piles of linen are gone. The amulets have been used. The pots of resin are being stored away. It is a space between projects, a moment of calm in the relentless cycle. Your father is speaking quietly with the KHE team, the business manager, likely settling the final accounts for Men and AS journey. You think back to your first day, to the boy who was nervously grinding natran in the corner. You have seen and done things that most Egyptians will only ever whisper about. You have reached inside a man, removed his organs, and cleansed his very essence. You have battled time with salt and resin. You have wielded hooks and knives not for violence, but for eternity. You have dressed a man for his meeting with the gods. It's a strange and profound realization. You are no longer just an apprentice. You are an emblem. This profession occupies a unique and paradoxical space in society. It's a fundamental truth of your world. You are revered for your sacred knowledge. The wealthiest and most powerful people in the kingdom depend on your skills for their eternal life. You are, in a very real sense, a gatekeeper to the afterlife. Without your craft, the soul would be lost. This high status is undeniable. Yet, as you learn it on your first day, you are also ritually impure. You live on the West Bank, the land of the dead. For a reason, you are surrounded by the symbols and substances of death. While others might respect your work from a distance, they might also cross the street to avoid walking too close to you. You are a living memento mori, a reminder of the one thing everyone fears. You will likely marry into another Embalmer's family. Your children will play among the discarded linen and clay pots of the workshop. This is your world, a sacred island, separated from the mainstream of life. Here lies the final and perhaps most enduring debate for historians. What was the true social standing of the ancient Egyptian emblem? The evidence is contradictory. Funerary texts and tomb depictions often portray the head emblem as a high-ranking priest, a controller of the mysteries. They are shown performing sacred rites, clearly figures of great importance. However, Greek and Roman accounts, written much later, sometimes describe them as a lower class, shunned group of artisans. So, were you a revered priest or a social outcast? The truth, you suspect, is not a simple either-or. It probably depended on your rank within the workshop. Your father, the master, is likely seen as a respected ritual specialist. You, an apprentice who does the messy work, are probably viewed with more suspicion. Status, like everything else, was layered and complex. Your father finishes his conversation and walks over to you. He places a heavy hand on your shoulder. He doesn't say much. He doesn't need to. He just looks at the empty table. Then at you. He sees the stains on your hands that won't wash out, the quiet confidence in your eyes that was there before. He gives a slight nod of approval. A new client could arrive at any moment. Another family will come with their grief and their hope. The cycle will begin again. You take a deep breath of the thick, fragrant air. It no longer smells strange or overwhelming. It smells like home. It smells like eternity. And so, your journey as an emblem finds its rhythm. The days blend into a cycle of receiving the hopeful dead, of purification and preparation, of patient waiting, and the final, artistic act of creation. You become fluent in the language of resonant linen, of sacred oils and protective amulets. The work settles into your bones, a deep and quiet knowledge that connects you to the very heart of your culture's beliefs. You are a guardian of tradition, a craftsman of forever. The sun sets over the Theban hills, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The living retreat to their homes on the east bank, while you remained here, in the quiet kingdom of the west. And as the first stars begin to prick the deep indigo of the night sky, you can rest, knowing you have played your part in the great cosmic story. You have helped another soul on its journey toward the field of reeds, toward a sunrise that never ends. And now, it is time for your own journey into the quiet lands of sleep. Let the soft hum of the night be your final incantation, a gentle lullaby carrying you into your own peaceful darkness, where dreams, like the souls of the departed, can roam free until the morning light.